Have you ever wondered what it feels like when the people you love the most push you to the edge? This is not just a story about money, it's a story about trust, manipulation, courage, and finding your own voice after years of silence. To protect their privacy, I've changed their names and locations, but everything you're about to hear is based on true events. So sit back, listen closely, and follow along. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, make sure you do so to never miss our latest stories. Don't forget to like this video and leave a comment saying I'm listening so we can stay connected and walk through these journeys together. The clock above the teller's counter at First Midwest Bank on Jefferson Street in Springfield, Illinois ticked toward 2:30 p.m. on a quiet Monday afternoon. Outside, the autumn wind rattled a row of half-bare maple trees. Inside, the bank smelled faintly of roasted coffee from the waiting area and the waxy polish of the tile floors. Martha Johnson, 72, sat at a heavy oak desk near the back with her son Mark, 45, and his wife Emily, 40. "Mom, just sign here," Emily said with a bright, practiced smile, her manicured hand resting gently, but firmly, on Martha's shoulder. "It's only a small formality. We've taken care of everything." She tilted her phone and snapped a quick picture of Mark pretending to read the contract, as if this were a happy family errand. Mark leaned closer, his shirt smelling of stale cigarette smoke and aftershave. His voice dropped into a low whisper meant only for his mother. "Don't make this hard on us, Mom. We're all tired." His fingers closed around her hand like a vice, guiding it toward the black pen on the table. Martha stared down at the thick packet of papers, a contract to sell the house she had lived in for 35 years. The title at the top blurred in her eyes, $180,000. Her entire world, the home she had raised her children in, reduced to a line on a bank form. The hum of the air conditioner vibrated above her head. She felt suffocated. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered harshly, making the white paper glow like ice. Somewhere behind her, a printer screeched out another customer's documents. In the waiting area, a young man in a suit scrolled on his phone, an elderly woman leafed through a brochure about CDs. None of them seemed to notice the small drama unfolding a few feet away. Martha's fingers trembled. Under her cardigan, soft blue, the one she'd knitted herself, sweat ran down her back in cold rivulets. She thought of the house, the rose bushes she and her late husband had planted in the front yard, the creak of the stairs at night, the smell of fresh bread in the kitchen. It wasn't just a property. It was her life. "Please, Mom," Mark said again, louder this time, glancing at the banker who was busy behind a glass panel. "It's going to help us all. We need this." His jaw was tight, his eyes darting between her face and the contract. I don't understand why it has to be now," Martha whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the HVAC. Emily laughed lightly, the sound brittle. "Because the buyer's waiting. We don't want to lose the deal. Come on, Mom, you trust us, right?" She angled the pen into Martha's hand. Martha's heart pounded so hard she thought the others could hear it. She felt the room tilt, the edges of her vision softening. She wanted to stand, to leave, to breathe. But Mark's grip tightened, and Emily's smile widened for another photo, a frozen moment of supposed family harmony. Inside, Martha screamed at herself, "Don't sign. Don't sign. This is everything you have left." Her lips quivered, but no sound came out. She sat there, pen hovering above the paper, an elderly woman trapped between loyalty, fear, and the growing certainty that she was being cornered. "Mom," Mark's voice softened but carried a sharp edge, "think about Ava. She's only 10. Don't let her suffer because of all this." He leaned closer, his elbows on the bank's polished oak table, as if the weight of his body could press his point into her heart. The name of her granddaughter hit Martha like a stone. She could almost see Ava's small hands clutching her school books, her shy smile when she visited Springfield last summer. Her fingers curled around the edge of the chair. She remembered how many times she had already saved this family. The image of her late husband George flashed before her eyes, George coughing on the hospital bed in Memorial Medical Center, his hands thin and veined, whispering, "Don't let them take advantage of you," before lung cancer took him. She had never repeated those words to anyone. Martha's eyes drifted to the thick packet of legal papers on the table, to the blue ink pen lying across it like a tiny sword. Only one signature and everything would be gone, the home she had lived in for 3 decades, the last piece of stability she had left. She remembered writing checks for Mark's tuition at Northwestern University, watching the numbers drain from her account with every semester but telling herself it was worth it. She remembered wiring money for their first condo in Chicago, believing her son and his wife just needed a push to start their new life. She remembered bailing them out when Emily maxed out 3 credit cards in 1 year. $50,000, not a cent had ever returned. Emily shifted closer, the faint scent of expensive perfume mixing with the sour smell of Martha's own cold sweat. "Mom," Emily murmured, her tone sugary but tight, "you're getting older. You can't handle big finances anymore. Let us take care of it. This is for the best." Her fingers brushed Martha's arm like a caress but felt like a grip. Martha's throat closed. She wanted to protest, to say she could still balance a checkbook, still drive herself to the grocery store, still think clearly. But her voice stayed inside. She looked around the bank, desperate for an ally. At the teller counters, 2 young employees bent over their screens, typing numbers as if the world beyond their monitors didn't exist. A man in a gray suit tapped on his phone. A woman with silver hair turned a page in a brochure about retirement CDs. Nobody looked at her. Nobody saw the scene. It was like being robbed in daylight but with no gun, just smiles, whispers, and family guilt. Martha felt her pulse in her temples. She clenched her cardigan tighter around her shoulders, as though it could protect her. "Just one signature, Mom," Mark said softly, leaning so close she could feel his breath on her cheek. "Then everything will be fine." But Martha's heart knew it was a lie. She sat still, her hands trembling, staring at the blue pen that seemed to glow under the harsh fluorescent light like a blade of fate. Mark's fingers clamped around Martha's hand so tightly that she let out a small, strangled ah, before she could stop herself. The sound barely left her throat, cut short by the lump of fear rising there. "Keep quiet. Don't make a scene," he hissed, his lips frozen in what might look like a smile to anyone passing by. Up close, though, his eyes were like ice, hard and flat. Martha's pulse roared in her ears. The boy she had carried for 9 months, the toddler she had held through fevers, the young man she had cheered for at college graduation, now sitting here with his wife, pressing her into a corner like a stranger. She could feel the indentation of his fingernails in the soft skin of her palm. On the far wall, the clock above the teller counter ticked to 2:45 p.m. The second hand glided over the face, indifferent. Outside the bank, life went on, traffic moved along Jefferson Street, a delivery truck hissed to a stop. Inside, under the cold hum of the air conditioner, a normal Monday afternoon had curdled into a private nightmare. Martha's mind flashed back to that morning. The phone had rung at 9 a.m., and Mark's voice, urgent and clipped, came down the line, "Mom, meet us at First Midwest at 2. Just some paperwork to sign." No explanation, no warmth. She had put on her best cardigan and come because she was used to obeying. She had thought maybe it was about Ava's school tuition, or some refinancing. She had not expected this. Now she sat, her breath shallow, her heart hammering. How did it come to this? She thought. What happened to my family? Just then, a movement caught her eye. From behind a frosted glass door, James Cooper, the branch manager, stepped out. He was a tall man in his 50s, with graying hair and a navy suit that fit just a little too tightly at the shoulders. He carried a clipboard and a practiced, professional smile, the kind that bank managers wear like armor. "Mrs. Johnson," he said, his voice warm but formal, "are you doing all right today?" The words landed like a lifeline thrown into rough water. Martha turned her head toward him slowly, afraid Mark might notice the spark of hope in her eyes. She felt her heart thudding against her ribs so hard it almost hurt. She started, her lips dry. Her hands trembled under the table. Mark's grip tightened. "Mom," he muttered, low and sharp, "answer him." Tell him you're fine." Martha swallowed hard. For a moment she could hear George's voice in her mind, the whisper from that hospital bed years ago, "Don't let them take advantage of you." She gripped the edge of the table, digging her nails into the wood. "Please, God," she murmured so softly only she could hear, "help me." James Cooper's eyes flickered with something, concern, perhaps suspicion, as he glanced at her and then at Mark and Emily. For the first time that day, Martha felt the faintest flicker of possibility. This might be her only chance to call for help before everything was too late. Martha's hands trembled so violently she could hardly feel the edges of the paper beneath her fingers. On the desk, next to the stack of contracts and the bank's promotional brochures, a colorful flyer about retirement planning lay half-folded. She tore off a corner with a quick, furtive motion, the sound of paper ripping masked by the clatter of a nearby printer. Her heart pounded in her chest like a drum. She clutched the small piece of paper in her palm, bent low as if she were reading the fine print on the contract, and with the pen Mark had forced into her hand, she scrawled a message, her handwriting crooked and uneven from the tremor in her wrist. "Help me. I'm being forced to sign. I don't want to." Tiny ink blots dotted the corner like raindrops. Mark and Emily were bent over another page, whispering in sharp tones about some clause. "We should initial here," Emily murmured, her manicured finger pointing at a line. "It'll go faster." Mark nodded, not even glancing at his mother. The moment was perfect, but it felt like stepping off a cliff. Martha inhaled deeply, the smell of stale coffee and carpet cleaner filling her lungs. She slid the folded scrap of paper across the desk, nudging it gently toward James Cooper, who had stepped closer under the guise of checking the paperwork. Her fingers brushed his for the briefest second, skin like ice meeting warmth, and then she let go. James picked it up as though it were just another form. He opened it casually, but when his eyes scanned the uneven words, his professional smile faltered. The corners of his mouth tightened. He lifted his gaze to Martha. For a split second, their eyes locked, hers pleading, his alert. She thought she saw his pupils widen, a flicker of understanding. He gave the tiniest nod, so subtle Mark and Emily wouldn't notice, and his left hand slid under the lip of the counter. Martha couldn't see it, but she heard a faint click, like a pen cap snapping shut. The bank's silent alarm. Relief washed over her in a dizzy wave. For the first time that afternoon, her heartbeat slowed. Someone knew. Someone would help her. Across the desk, Mark frowned. "Mom? You okay? You look pale." He reached out, but she pulled her hand back quickly, folding her arms over her cardigan as if to keep herself from shattering. "I'm fine," she whispered, though her throat felt like sandpaper. Inside her mind, memories tumbled, decades of saying yes, of giving without asking, of believing that sacrifice was love. She saw herself at 25, holding Mark as a baby, promising she would always protect him. She saw George's face in the hospital, telling her to be strong. All those moments had led her here, to this desk, to this piece of paper. As James Cooper stepped back, signaling discreetly to a security guard near the entrance, Martha sat a little straighter. A thin thread of courage wound its way through her chest. This wasn't the end, this was the first crack in the shell of fear she had lived inside for years. She clenched her trembling hands in her lap and whispered under her breath, "Not today." And for the first time that day, she believed herself. Martha could still see it as if it were yesterday, the sterile white walls of Memorial Hospital in Springfield, the faint smell of disinfectant and baby powder, the snow flurries drifting past the window on a January morning in 1978. When the nurse placed newborn Mark into her arms, tiny fists clenched and lungs screaming, she had whispered to him, "I'll give you everything, my son. Everything I have." In that moment, it hadn't felt like a promise, it felt like breathing. Years later, she would think back on that vow while wiping down diner tables at midnight, but back then it was just love. When Mark was 6, he wanted a BMX bike with red handlebars like the neighbor kid. George worked double shifts at the post office, and Martha picked up extra hours sewing hems at a dry cleaner. They scraped together enough to buy it used from a garage sale, then stayed up late polishing it so it looked brand new. On Christmas morning, Mark squealed, "It's just like Jason's," and rode laps in the snow-dusted driveway while Martha watched from the porch, heart full, fingers numb. At 16, Mark begged to go to an elite summer camp in Michigan that cost $2,000, money they didn't have. Martha remembered sitting at the kitchen table late at night, the only light a flickering bulb above the sink, slipping her own mother's wedding ring off her finger and turning it over in her palm. She sold it quietly to a pawn shop downtown. "It's just a ring," she told George when he asked. "He deserves a chance." When Mark got into Chicago Law School at $45,000 a year, Martha and George mortgaged their house again. George's back ached from years of lifting mail sacks, Martha's feet swelled from standing 10-hour shifts at Lou's Diner, pouring coffee for truckers at 3 a.m. She'd limp home, kick off her shoes, and still make Mark's favorite pancakes when he visited on weekends. The day he graduated summa cum laude, she cried so hard the dean offered her a tissue. "You did it, Mom," Mark said, hugging her in his cap and gown. She thought then, "It's done. I've given him his wings." But the requests didn't stop. Mark met Emily at a law firm mixer. Emily was bright and pretty, but Martha remembered their first lunch together at a cafe in Chicago. Emily's first question had been, "So, has your house been paid off?" A tiny alarm had sounded inside Martha, but she had silenced it with a polite laugh. Their wedding came next, $60,000 for a lavish hotel reception. George was already battling diabetes complications, yet Martha took out another loan. "It's their once-in-a-lifetime day," she told herself while signing the papers. And so it went, one check after another, one last time after another, her savings thinning like paper in the rain. Each sacrifice had seemed small in the moment, but together they formed a chain that bound her. Sitting now in the bank, Martha could feel every link. She pressed her trembling hands together on her lap. "I've been saying yes for 45 years, she thought. Maybe today is the day I start to say no. After the wedding, the phone calls started like a slow drip. At first, they were small, almost apologetic. "Mom, the car broke down on I-55. We're stuck. Can you help with the repair?" Mark's voice on the other end of the line would sound tired, rushed. Emily would chime in with a shaky, "We'll pay you back right away, I promise." Martha would cradle the receiver at her kitchen table, staring at the floral wallpaper she had put up herself, and sigh, "All right, I'll send something." But the calls never stopped. One month it was the Honda Civic's transmission. Another month it was Emily's between jobs or our credit card got maxed because of Ava's school trip. Always urgent, always framed as the last emergency. Each time, Martha reached for her checkbook or her debit card, telling herself she was just helping until they got on their feet. Then came the big ask. A Sunday afternoon in late March, the house smelled of chicken soup she had just made when Mark called. "Mom," he said, voice low, "we found a house in Peoria. It's perfect, good schools, big yard for Ava. It's $220,000, and we only need $50,000 for the down payment." Martha closed her eyes, the spoon hovering above the pot. "50,000, she repeated, her heart thudding. "We'll pay every penny back," Mark said quickly. "You know we're good for it. Ava deserves a home like this. Please." In the background she could hear Emily crying softly, or perhaps theatrically. "This is our only chance, Mom," Emily's voice floated in. That night, Martha sat at her kitchen table with her retirement account papers spread out before her. 25 years of careful saving, double shifts, Christmas tips, skipped vacations, lay in neat columns of numbers. She knew withdrawing early would cost her a 10% penalty, but the image of Ava playing in a safe backyard pulled at her heart. "I'm not just a mother," she told her reflection in the dark window. "I'm a hero." The next day at the bank she signed the withdrawal slip with a trembling hand. Emily clutched the check to her chest, tears streaking her makeup. "You're saving us, Mom," she whispered. Mark hugged her, stiff and quick, already glancing at his phone. They moved into their new house a week later, sending her a blurry photo of Ava on a swing set. But the calls didn't stop. The roof is leaking, we need $12,000 for repairs. The stove is broken, we found a new one for $5,000. Always another crisis, always another check. When Martha hesitated, when she said, "I'll have to think about it," the trump card came out. "Mom," Mark would say, lowering his voice, "you don't want Ava to suffer, do you?" Those words sliced through her like a blade. In her mind she saw Ava's big brown eyes, her hair flying as she ran through the yard. And once again, Martha reached for her wallet, feeling the ground beneath her give way a little more each time. Of all the people in her life, Ava, her 10-year-old granddaughter, was the one bright spot left. On quiet evenings Martha would find an envelope in her mailbox with crooked handwriting and a drawing inside, Ava's way of staying close. One letter showed a smiling grandmother in a red cape flying over a little house. "Grandma is our hero," Ava had written in purple marker, "because she saves our family." Martha had sat at her kitchen table staring at that picture, her eyes blurring. It both warmed and broke her heart. She could never say no to Ava. Ballet lessons in Peoria, piano classes downtown, summer camp in Michigan, costumes for school plays, every time the requests came, Martha reached for her checkbook without hesitation. She told herself, "It's for the child. Children deserve to have what I couldn't." Meanwhile, life at home was a different story. George, her husband of 43 years, was fighting lung cancer. His medication and treatments were expensive, and the insurance barely covered half. Martha doubled her shifts at Lou's Diner, wiping counters and refilling coffee at 2 in the morning. Her feet throbbed so badly she'd soak them in Epsom salt when she got home, yet still she'd make breakfast for George before he woke up. One night, after another 14-hour shift, she walked through the back door, her uniform smelling of fried eggs and coffee. George was dozing in his recliner, thin under a crocheted blanket. She knelt beside him and brushed his hair back. "I'm home," she whispered. He opened his eyes and gave her a tired smile. Her younger sister Linda had been calling more often. "Why don't you ask Mark to help?" Linda said one evening over the phone, her voice firm but kind. "He's got a law degree, a house, a wife. You've given enough." Martha pinched the bridge of her nose, the phone warm against her cheek. "It's my responsibility, not his," she replied quietly. A mother doesn't ask her child to carry her burdens. She hung up and stared at the kitchen wall clock ticking past midnight, feeling both resolute and utterly alone. George passed away 4 years after his diagnosis, his hand in hers, whispering, "You've done enough," with his last breath. Martha felt something inside her collapse, a silence deeper than grief. She walked through their house afterward like a ghost, the rose bushes outside dying from neglect, the rooms echoing with memories. Financially, she was nearly empty. Years of medical bills and bailouts had drained her savings. All she had left was the house on Jefferson Street, valued at about $180,000, the same house she and George had built their life in. The mortgage was finally paid off, but it felt less like security and more like a fragile lifeline. Sitting at her kitchen table one rainy afternoon, Martha ran her fingers over Ava's latest drawing, the hero in the red cape, arms outstretched. She whispered, "I'm no hero, baby. I'm just tired." Yet even in that whisper, she felt a flicker of determination, somewhere inside her, a quiet voice saying she had to start saving herself, too. After George's funeral, Martha had stood at the kitchen sink looking out at the overgrown rose bushes and whispered to herself, "No more. From now on I'll be careful. I'll learn to say no." She repeated it like a prayer each morning as she poured her coffee, hoping the words would grow roots inside her. She balanced her checkbook, cut coupons, and finally started to feel the fragile outline of control returning. 2 months later, the phone rang. It was Mark. His voice was softer than usual, almost rehearsed. "Mom," he began, the firm cut back. "I lost my job. Emily's part-time hours aren't enough. They're threatening to move Ava to a public school across town. She's crying every night. We just need a little help, $30,000. Only for 6 months. I swear we'll pay it back." Martha gripped the receiver. She could see the unpaid bills stacked on her own counter, the bottles of George's leftover medication still on the shelf. Her heart twisted at the mention of Ava. 30,000? She asked slowly, her voice a mix of disbelief and dread. Yes, Mom, Mark said quickly, sensing hesitation. It's just a bridge. You've always been there for us. Please, don't let Ava suffer because of this. In the background she heard Emily murmuring something, maybe prompting him. That night, Martha sat at her dining table under the dim glow of the chandelier. The walls were lined with family photos, Mark in his graduation gown, Ava at her ballet recital, George holding a fishing pole by the lake. She folded her hands together and whispered, "This is the last time. I promise." She withdrew the money from her small savings, swallowing the penalty, telling herself it was temporary. 3 months passed. Mark found another job, she saw his LinkedIn update, but no money came back. When she called to ask, Emily rattled off excuses, "We had to fix the car." Ava needed dental work. The mortgage was behind. "We'll send something soon." But soon never arrived. Now she was sitting in the cool, too bright interior of First Midwest Bank, the scent of carpet cleaner sharp in her nostrils, the hum of the air conditioner a constant in her ears. Mark and Emily sat across from her, papers spread out, smiles fixed like masks. "Mom, just sign," Emily said brightly, holding her phone up for a selfie. "This is a big step for all of us." Martha looked at her son, the boy she had fed from her breast, clothed, and cheered for through every milestone. He sat beside his wife, pressing her to sell her home, their home, while they posed for the camera like a happy family. She felt hollowed out, a shell of herself, the last reserves of energy draining away. But deep beneath the exhaustion, something else stirred, a flicker of anger, of resolve. She straightened slightly in her chair, her fingers tightening on her cardigan. Enough, she thought. This ends now. She didn't know exactly how yet, but for the first time in years, Martha felt the faint pulse of her own power returning. This was the moment she would decide to save herself. James Cooper reappeared at the edge of the desk, this time not alone. 2 uniformed security guards walked a few steps behind him, their expressions neutral but alert. The steady murmur of the bank floor continued, printers whirring, keyboards clacking, but Martha felt everything narrow to this moment. "Mrs. Johnson," Cooper said smoothly, his voice warm but authoritative, "for your protection we need to verify some information with you privately. Could you come with me for just a minute?" He extended his hand across the table, palm open, the gesture polite but firm. Emily's head snapped up. "Wait, what?" "This isn't necessary," she said, her tone still sugary but a nervous edge creeping in. She shifted in her chair, clutching her purse to her chest. "We're her family. She doesn't need to go anywhere." Mark tightened his jaw but kept silent. His hand still gripped Martha's wrist, though his fingers had gone clammy. "Mom," he murmured through his teeth, "just say you're fine. Don't make a scene." Martha looked at Cooper's outstretched hand. Something in his eyes, steady, unflinching, felt like a lifeline. She inhaled deeply, the smell of his cologne cutting through the stale air of the bank. With a small but deliberate motion, she slid her hand out from under Mark's and placed it into Cooper's. Mark's grip fell away. Emily rose halfway from her seat. "Mother, don't do this. Don't make things difficult," she cried, her voice carrying across the teller line. A few customers looked up briefly, then returned to their phones. Martha stood. Her knees trembled, but she straightened her back. She didn't look at her son or his wife, she knew if she met Mark's eyes she might falter. Instead, she fixed her gaze on the glass door leading to the manager's office and walked toward it, her sensible shoes clicking softly on the tile. Inside the small private room, the door shut with a gentle thud. The hum of the bank floor faded. Martha sat in a leather chair opposite Cooper's desk, clasping her hands in her lap. She could feel her pulse in her fingertips. "You're safe here," Cooper said quietly, taking a seat and pulling a notepad toward him. "Tell me what's going on." And then it all poured out. The years of drained savings, the last-time loans that were never repaid, the mortgage she'd risked for Mark's education, the silent bruises on her arm from his grip at the desk, the way they used Ava's name like a weapon. Her voice cracked, but she kept speaking, tears sliding down her cheeks onto her cardigan. Cooper's pen scratched steadily across the page. When she finished, he set it down and looked her in the eye. "Mrs. Johnson, this is called financial coercion. It's elder abuse. And it's against the law." Martha blinked at him, stunned. All her life she had thought of herself as the helper, the rescuer, the strong one. Hearing the word victim felt like a door opening and closing at the same time. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I thought I was just being a good mother." Cooper nodded gently. "Good mothers deserve protection, too," he said. For the first time in decades, Martha felt something shift inside, a small, clear space where her own voice could live. James Cooper slid the contract back into its manila folder with a firm, deliberate motion. "This transaction is cancelled," he said, his baritone voice calm but final. "I've frozen the file, and we'll be flagging this account for review." He reached across his desk and handed Martha a cream-colored card. The embossed blue letters at the top read Illinois Elder Protection Hotline. "These people specialize in protecting seniors from financial coercion," he added softly. "You don't have to go through this alone." Martha stared at the card as if it were a foreign object. Her thumb traced the raised numbers. Behind her eyelids flashed a montage, George in his hospital bed whispering, "Take care of yourself," the long nights at the diner, little Ava's drawings of her as a superhero with a red cape. In that instant she saw clearly the pattern she had been trapped in, and what it was teaching her granddaughter, that love had a price tag, that grandma existed to fix everyone's problems. "Mrs. Johnson," Cooper said gently, "are you ready to say no?" Her voice caught in her throat. She thought of George again, of how he had once told her, "Martha, one day you'll have to stop saving everyone else." She saw Ava's bright green eyes and imagined them learning a different lesson. She drew a deep breath that seemed to rise from the soles of her feet. "I'm ready," she said. The words came out stronger than she expected, ringing in the quiet office like a bell. When she stepped back into the main lobby of First Midwest, everything seemed sharper, the clack of the teller's keyboards, the muted buzz of the fluorescent lights, the faint scent of burnt coffee from the break room. Mark and Emily were still seated at the table, whispering urgently. As soon as they saw her, Emily shot up, her smile stretched too wide. "Mama, everything's okay now, right?" Emily asked, voice trembling. "Just sign and we can all go home." Martha stopped 2 steps from the table. She squared her shoulders, feeling the card from Cooper still warm in her hand. "No," she said clearly. "I'm not signing anything. This is my house, and I'm keeping it." The bank seemed to go silent. Even the printer stopped mid-spool. Mark's face darkened, the charming son replaced by a stranger. "Mom," he hissed, "don't do this in front of everyone." Emily's eyes filled with manufactured tears. "Think about Ava," she pleaded. "She'll be crushed." Martha felt the tremor in her knees but didn't sit down. "This isn't selfishness," she said, her voice steady as steel. "This is survival. This is me taking back my life." Cooper stepped forward, his presence like a shield. "I'm going to have to ask you both to leave now," he told Mark and Emily firmly. The 2 guards moved subtly closer. Mark grabbed his briefcase. Emily sniffled dramatically. They turned and walked out, their faces a mask of resentment. The glass doors swung shut behind them with a muted thud. Martha lowered herself into a chair near the window. Her hands were still shaking, but for the first time in years the shaking wasn't from fear, it was from the flood of relief rushing through her veins. Outside, the late afternoon sun slanted across Jefferson Street. She watched cars pass and realized she was breathing freely again. She had said no. She had chosen herself. It was a quiet Friday afternoon in Springfield. The clock on the mantelpiece had just ticked past 4:30 p.m. when Martha, sitting at her kitchen table with a lukewarm cup of tea, heard a soft, hesitant knock on the front door of her small bungalow at 823 Jefferson Street. She frowned. She wasn't expecting anyone. The late October sunlight slanted through the lace curtains, throwing long shadows across the linoleum floor as she made her way to the door. Her knees ached from years of double shifts at the diner, but she moved quickly, a strange tug of intuition in her chest. When she opened the door, the sight before her made her breath catch. Ava, her 10-year-old granddaughter, stood on the porch clutching a pink backpack covered in glittery stickers. The child's sneakers were scuffed, her hair slightly mussed from the autumn breeze. In her small hands she twisted the strap of her bag, a nervous habit Martha recognized instantly. "Hi, Grandma," Ava said softly, almost as if she were afraid of being scolded. Her big green eyes, so like Mark's when he was little, blinked up at her, wide and uncertain. "Mommy said you're mad at us. Did I do something wrong?" Martha's heart squeezed painfully. She crouched down until they were eye to eye, ignoring the pull in her hips. She reached out and brushed a strand of hair from Ava's forehead. "No, sweetheart. No. You haven't done anything wrong," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Grandma's not mad at you." Ava bit her lip and shifted her weight from one foot to the other. "Then why don't you call me? I keep waiting for your voice on the phone. I miss you a lot." The words cut deeper than any demand for money ever had. Martha felt her throat tighten as she pulled the little girl into her arms. The scent of strawberry shampoo and crayons clung to Ava's hair. "Oh, baby," she murmured. "Sometimes grown-ups have problems they need to sort out. But Grandma still loves you. I always will." They stayed like that for a long moment, the cool breeze curling around them on the porch. Martha could feel Ava's small heartbeat against her own chest, fast and uncertain. She pulled back slightly to look at her. "Come inside for a bit?" Ava nodded shyly. As they stepped into the living room, a neighbor, Mr. Johnson, walked past with his beagle and called over the hedge, "What a pretty granddaughter you have there, Mrs. Johnson." Martha forced a smile, blinking back tears. "Thank you," she replied, her voice barely steady. Inside, she set Ava's backpack on the couch and fetched 2 mugs of hot chocolate, the way she always used to when the girl visited after school. She watched Ava's eyes roam the unfamiliar living room, the new curtains, the different pictures on the wall, and realized how much had changed since the last time she had held her here. In that moment, seeing the confusion and innocence on her granddaughter's face, Martha understood with brutal clarity that Ava was only a child caught in a web of adult manipulation. She wasn't the enemy. She was another victim, just smaller and softer. Martha reached out and took Ava's hand across the table. "No matter what you hear from Mommy or Daddy," she said gently, "don't ever think Grandma stopped loving you." Ava nodded silently, sipping her chocolate. The warmth of the mug seemed to calm her, but Martha could still see the questions flickering behind her eyes. And as she sat there holding her granddaughter's hand, Martha felt both heartbreak and resolve rise within her. She would not let this little girl grow up believing that love had to be bought. The rain had started to fall softly against the windows by the time Martha and Ava settled into the living room. The old clock ticked steadily, filling the quiet space with its patient rhythm. Ava dug into her glittery pink backpack and pulled out a piece of folded paper, her small fingers smoothing it carefully on her knees. "Grandma," she said shyly, "I made this for you." Martha wiped her hands on her apron. She'd been kneading dough earlier, trying to keep herself busy, and took the paper. When she unfolded it, her heart lurched. The drawing showed a crooked gray house, its windows shaded dark, and in front of it stood a small figure with gray hair and a sagging cardigan. No smiles, no sun in the sky, just gray clouds. "This is me?" she asked, her voice a whisper. Ava nodded solemnly. "You look sad in the picture." Her little brow furrowed as she swung her feet nervously above the carpet. "Mommy said you've been confused. That some bad people at the bank are trying to trick you." Martha's fingers trembled as she smoothed the paper again. The scent of apple pie, baked yesterday, still lingered faintly in the room, mixing with the rain smell coming through the window. She took a slow breath, trying to steady her voice. "Come in, sweetheart, don't stand there," she said softly, motioning to the couch. Ava clambered up, tucking her legs beneath her like she used to when she was smaller. "Why would Mommy say that?" Martha asked gently, searching Ava's face. "I don't know," Ava murmured. "She said some strangers at the bank are making you sign things and it's not safe. She said she's trying to protect you." The child's eyes were wide, as if she herself wasn't sure what to believe. Martha reached over and stroked Ava's hair, the silky strands falling through her fingers. "There aren't any bad people, darling," she said finally, her voice calm but firm. "The people at the bank were trying to help Grandma. Sometimes grown-ups see the same thing but tell it differently." Ava tilted her head, considering this. "Mommy said something else, though. She said you don't want to see us anymore." The words struck like a blow. Martha blinked back tears, forcing a small smile. "That's not true, Ava. I could never stop wanting to see you. You're my little girl," she said, her thumb brushing a tear off Ava's cheek. Ava studied her drawing again. "Then why are you sad?" she asked quietly. Martha hesitated. She wanted to tell her everything, the exhaustion, the years of sacrifice, the lies, but looking into the child's eyes, she chose gentleness. Because sometimes grown-ups forget how to take care of themselves, and that can make them sad. But Grandma is learning. Ava snuggled closer on the couch, laying her head on Martha's arm. "I don't like it when you're sad," she whispered. "I know, baby," Martha replied softly, kissing the top of her head. "But you don't have to worry. Grandma's going to be okay." The clock ticked on, the rain drummed softly, and Martha sat holding her granddaughter, the gray drawing lying on the coffee table between them. She stared at it for a long time, feeling the weight of Emily's words twisting the truth, and resolved that Ava would one day know the real story, not the one painted for her. Late Saturday afternoon, the sun was dipping low over Springfield, painting the neighborhood roofs with a soft golden glow. A light breeze rustled the maple trees lining Jefferson Street. Martha stepped out onto the wooden porch of her small house, its white paint peeling slightly after years of Midwest winters. She held the screen door open for Ava, who came skipping behind with a box of colored pencils tucked under her arm. "Come sit with Grandma for a bit," Martha said gently, patting the swing bench. Ava climbed up, her sneakers knocking softly against the wood. For a moment they just rocked back and forth, the chain creaking, the smell of freshly cut grass drifting across from Mr. Johnson's yard. Martha tilted her head back, eyes searching the wide blue sky above. "Look up there, sweetheart," she said, pointing to a slow-moving puff of white drifting across. "What do you see in that cloud?" Ava squinted, shielding her eyes with her small hand. A smile spread across her face. "A cat," she declared, giggling. "It has little ears and a tail." Martha chuckled, the sound warm but tinged with something wistful. "Funny," she murmured. "I see a dog, with floppy ears and a wagging tail." She turned to meet Ava's puzzled expression. "See? Same cloud, two different pictures." Ava's giggle faded into a thoughtful frown. "So, we can both be right?" "Yes," Martha said softly. "Sometimes people look at the same thing and see it differently. It doesn't always mean one of them is lying." She squeezed Ava's hand, hoping the little girl would hear the deeper message beneath her words. Ava swung her legs idly, the laces of her sneakers tapping against the porch rail. "Is that like Mommy and you?" she asked suddenly. "You both say different things about the bank." Martha's heart gave a painful thump. She took a slow breath, staring at the horizon where the sun met the rooftops. "Something like that," she answered carefully. "But one day you'll understand better. For now, just know Grandma loves you." Ava opened her colored pencil box, pulling out a sky blue crayon. "Can we draw the cloud?" she asked. "Of course," Martha replied. She fetched a pad of paper from the kitchen and spread it between them on the porch floorboards. They both bent over it, shoulders touching. The scratch-scratch of pencils filled the air as they traced outlines of their own animals, Ava's cat with bright green eyes, Martha's dog with a wagging tail. As they colored, Martha added quietly, "You know, honey, Grandma is still your grandma, even if she doesn't buy things or give money." "That doesn't change." Ava looked up, her eyes wide. "Really? You mean you'll still love me?" Martha smiled and brushed a strand of hair from Ava's face. "Always," she whispered. For the first time in weeks, Ava's face brightened, a flicker of hope breaking through the confusion. The two of them sat in the fading light, coloring their animals side by side, the porch creaking gently as if rocking them into a small moment of peace in a world of tangled truths. The sky over Springfield was turning a deep orange when the porch light flicked on automatically. A cool breeze carried the faint scent of cut grass and gasoline from a neighbor's lawnmower. Ava zipped up her little pink backpack, slipping her sketchpad inside with the carefulness of a child who knows her things matter. She stood at the edge of the porch steps, her small figure framed by the glow from the screen door. "Grandma," she said hesitantly, twisting the strap of her bag. You're not going to pay for my ballet anymore, are you?" Martha felt the words hit her like a stone dropped into still water. Her heart gave a slow, aching squeeze. She knelt down so her eyes were level with Ava's, the porch boards pressing cold through her knees. "Why do you ask me that, sweetheart?" she asked softly, brushing a wisp of hair off Ava's forehead. Ava shrugged, eyes darting away to the street. "Because Mommy said you're mad at us. And if you're mad, maybe you won't help anymore. And then I can't go to ballet." Her voice cracked on the last word. "I don't want to stop dancing." Martha swallowed hard, tasting the bitterness of years gone by. She could feel the weight of her own choices pressing on her shoulders, the endless checks, the quick rescues, the way she had taught her son and granddaughter that Grandma's love always came with an open wallet. She took Ava's small hands in her own. "Tell me something, honey," she said gently. "Do you love Grandma because she gives you money? Or do you love Grandma because she's your grandma?" Ava blinked, clearly confused by the question. "I love you because you're my grandma, but the money is nice too." She hesitated, then added with the honesty only a child can have, "Mommy says you're the best grandma because you always help." The words cut deeper than any insult could have. Martha felt tears sting the corners of her eyes. She realized in that moment how she had unknowingly built this equation in Ava's heart, that love equals giving, that grandma equals saving everyone. She squeezed Ava's fingers, her voice low but steady. "Listen to me, sweetheart. I love you because you're you. Not because you dance ballet, not because of anything you do. Just because you're my Ava." Ava's lip trembled, her green eyes wide and searching. "Even if I can't go to ballet?" she whispered. "Even then," Martha said firmly. She pulled the child into her arms, inhaling the scent of shampoo and crayons. Ava leaned against her shoulder, small and warm, and murmured, "I love you too, Grandma." For a moment they stayed like that, the porch light casting a soft circle around them, the hum of distant traffic like a lullaby. Martha felt something shift inside her, an invisible thread loosening, a quiet beginning of change. She knew breaking the old pattern would be hard, but right there on that porch, holding Ava close, she felt a flicker of hope that maybe she could teach her granddaughter a new kind of love, one that had nothing to do with money at all. The porch light had begun to flicker on and off as twilight settled over Jefferson Street. Martha sat on the edge of the swing bench, one hand absent-mindedly smoothing Ava's hair, the other gripping the wooden armrest. The child leaned against her for a moment, warm and light as a bird. Martha spoke softly, the words coming from a place deeper than habit. "Sweetheart, real love can't be bought with money. Do you understand that?" Ava nodded, but her gaze wandered off toward the street, toward the shiny SUV idling at the curb. Her small brows furrowed, trying to make sense of something far too big for her 10 years. Martha could feel the conflict inside the little girl, years of seeing Grandma's love expressed in ballet lessons, costumes, and gifts. How could she believe anything different now? From the car came a sharp, impatient honk. Emily's silhouette was visible through the tinted window, her hand tapping the steering wheel. The sound sliced through the quiet evening like a blade. Ava straightened and slipped from Martha's lap, her sneakers thudding softly on the porch steps. "I have to go," she murmured, eyes downcast. Then she looked up quickly, as if afraid to forget, and added, "I'll call you, Grandma." Martha forced a smile, her throat tight. "You do that, honey. Remember what I told you." Ava gave a small wave, then ran toward the waiting car. Martha watched as her granddaughter's pink backpack bounced with each step, then vanished behind the door. The tinted glass swallowed her up, leaving only a dim reflection of the porch light. The SUV pulled away, tires crunching on the gravel, taillights glowing red against the dusk. The moment the car turned the corner, Martha felt her hand begin to tremble. She pressed it flat against her chest, drawing in a shaky breath. The porch felt suddenly empty, the house behind her cavernous and quiet. She stepped back inside, closing the screen door with a soft creak. In the living room, the smell of old books and apple-scented candles lingered. The clock ticked steadily, marking a silence she hadn't noticed in years. On the mantel was a framed photograph of George at the county fair, his arm around her, a gentle grin under his gray mustache. She walked over and touched the edge of the frame, her fingers trembling as they traced his face. "George," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I haven't just lost the money. I've lost my voice, my boundaries." The confession floated in the dim room like a prayer. She sank into the armchair, the same one where she used to read bedtime stories to Mark, and let the tears fall quietly. Yet even as she sat there, a flicker of resolve stirred. She pictured Ava's confused eyes, her small hand in hers. She realized that, even now, she had the power to break the pattern, to shield her granddaughter from the same game of money and guilt. She straightened in the chair, wiping her cheeks with the back of her hand. "It starts here," she murmured to the empty room. "It starts with me." Outside, the streetlights buzzed on, casting a soft glow through the lace curtains. For the first time in years, Martha felt the faint but steady beat of hope beneath her ribs. It was a cool Tuesday morning, a week after the confrontation at the bank. The sun lay low over Springfield, spilling a soft, honey-colored light across Martha's small front yard. She stood at the edge of her flower beds in a worn denim jacket, a faded baseball cap shading her eyes, watering the rose bushes she'd tended for decades. The spray from the hose caught the sunlight in tiny rainbows. She found herself humming an old hymn George used to like, the melody floating up with the mist. The doorbell rang, a clear chime that startled her out of her reverie. Martha turned off the hose, wiped her damp hands on her jeans, and walked slowly toward the porch. Through the screen she saw a young woman standing there, no more than 25, with a neat bob of chestnut brown hair and round glasses perched on her nose. She held a canvas tote bag tight against her side like a shield. "Mrs. Johnson?" the girl asked, her voice tentative but kind. "I'm Lisa. Lisa Myers. Linda's niece. I hope it's okay that I stopped by." Martha's brows knitted for a second, then she smiled faintly. "Linda's niece? Of course, dear. Come in, come in." She opened the door wider, gesturing to the living room that still smelled faintly of coffee and cinnamon candles. Lisa stepped inside, looking around at the family photos on the walls. "I'm sorry to show up unannounced," she said, setting her tote down by the sofa. I read about you in the Springfield Chronicle last Sunday. The article about elder financial abuse. You were so brave to speak up." Martha blinked. "I didn't even know they printed that." She eased herself into her armchair, motioning for Lisa to sit on the couch. "What made you come here?" Lisa clasped her hands in her lap, knuckles pale. "Because I went through something similar. My mom, she had a gambling problem. When I was 19, she had me sign loans in my name to pay off her debts. Credit cards, payday loans. I thought I was helping, but I was drowning. It took me 2 years of cutting contact before I could even begin to get my life back." Her voice trembled, but her eyes stayed steady. Martha felt a deep, aching empathy rise in her chest, as if she were looking at a glimpse of Ava's future if nothing changed. "Oh, honey," she murmured. "That must have been so hard." Lisa nodded quickly, eyes shining. "When I saw your picture in the paper, you standing outside the bank, I knew I had to tell you, you're not alone. It isn't your fault. People don't talk about this kind of thing enough." She reached across the coffee table and gently took Martha's hand. Her grip was warm and sure. "You did something really important, Mrs. Johnson. You showed people like me that saying no is possible." Martha's throat tightened. She squeezed Lisa's hand back, feeling both the fragility and the strength in it. "Thank you, Lisa," she said softly. "You don't know how much it means to hear that. For so long I thought I was the only one." They sat there for a moment, two women from different generations bound by the same wound, sunlight slanting across the carpet like a quiet blessing. For the first time in weeks, Martha felt not just hope, but connection. The living room was awash in the warm, late-morning light filtering through lace curtains. Dust motes danced in the beams, tiny golden flecks suspended in the still air. Lisa sat forward on the couch, elbows resting on her knees, her fingers twisting the edge of her tote bag as if trying to wring out the memories. Martha sat across from her in George's old armchair, hands folded in her lap, listening with the kind of stillness only someone who has lived through storms can hold. "At first," Lisa began, her voice low but steady, "I thought it was my duty. She was my mother. I told myself I had to help her no matter what. It felt like love, like loyalty." She gave a short, bitter laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "I maxed out credit cards, took out loans in my name, even skipped my own rent to cover hers. Every time I hesitated, she'd cry, tell me I was all she had, that I was her last hope. And I believed it." Martha's hands clenched around each other. The words felt like echoes of her own life, spoken through a younger mouth. She could almost see Ava, older now, sitting where Lisa sat, telling the same story. Lisa took a breath, her gaze fixed on a framed photo of George and little Mark at the county fair. "But then I started to see a pattern. She didn't want me. She wanted what I could give. It wasn't love she was taking, it was my survival. She was using my guilt to stay afloat, and I was sinking." Her voice cracked, but she kept going. "I had to block her number. Do you know what that's like?" She looked at Martha, eyes bright with unshed tears. "To block your own mother? To read text messages accusing you of betrayal, of letting her die? She even threatened to hurt herself if I didn't send more money. It broke me. But that's what saved me." The room was so quiet that Martha could hear the clock ticking on the mantel. Lisa's next words came softer, as if offering a fragile truth. "After 2 years, when I finally had my feet under me, I reached out. And now we have a real relationship. Because there are boundaries. Because when you take money out of the equation, you can finally see what's left. That's where the real love is." Martha felt her heartbeat quicken, a tiny spark of hope igniting in her chest. "You're telling me it's possible?" she whispered. "That you can come back from this and still have a relationship?" Lisa nodded, a faint smile touching her lips. "Yes. But it starts with protecting yourself first." She leaned forward, her young face luminous with earnestness. "There's a support group at the Central Library downtown. Tuesday evenings. People like us, parents, kids, grandparents, who've been through financial abuse. Come with me. You don't have to do this alone." Martha stared at her for a long moment, feeling the weight of her years, her losses, and yet something new, a door opening. She reached out and squeezed Lisa's hand. "I'll try," she said, her voice trembling but sure. "Yes. I'll try." And for the first time in a long time, she felt like maybe she wasn't drowning anymore. On Tuesday evening, just as the courthouse clock in downtown Springfield chimed 6 times, Martha stood outside the Lincoln Public Library. The red brick building glowed under the streetlights, its tall windows catching the last glint of daylight. She clutched her worn leather purse against her chest, feeling her pulse thrum in her fingertips. It had been years since she'd set foot in the library. She remembered bringing little Mark here for story hour, George meeting her after work to walk home together. Now she was walking in alone, her heart pounding like she was about to take a test. Inside, the scent of old paper and floor polish greeted her. She followed a discreet sign taped to a corkboard, Community Room B, Financial Abuse Survivors Group, down a short hallway with muted carpet. Her palms were damp when she reached the door. Through the frosted glass she could see shadows, hear the murmur of voices. She hesitated, then took a breath and pushed it open. The room was small and plain, with beige walls and a circle of folding chairs. About 15 people were already seated, men and women of all ages, a gray-haired man in overalls, a young woman with a baby in her lap, a middle-aged couple sitting side by side but not touching. They all looked up as she entered. Sandra, the facilitator, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a clipboard balanced on her knee, stood and smiled. "Welcome. You must be Mrs. Johnson?" "Yes," Martha said softly, slipping into an empty chair. "Just Martha, please." Sandra gestured around the circle. "We're glad you're here. This is a safe space. We're survivors and supporters. Everything you share stays in this room." As introductions went around, Martha listened. A man spoke about his son forging his signature to drain his retirement account. A grandmother described how her brother had mortgaged her home behind her back. Another woman wiped tears as she told how her niece sold off her grandmother's savings under the guise of helping. Each story landed like a stone in Martha's stomach, heavy and familiar. She kept her eyes down, twisting a tissue in her lap. When it was her turn, she opened her mouth, and the words came like a flood. She told them about the years of checks and promises, the bank, Mark's grip on her arm, Emily's smiles, the way Ava had been used as a shield. She heard her own voice tremble and rise, but no one interrupted. When she finished, there was silence, then a gentle murmur of understanding. A woman across the circle reached out to squeeze her hand. The touch was warm, steady, without judgment. Sandra spoke softly. Financial abuse within families is hard to recognize because it's wrapped in what looks like love, obligation, guilt, loyalty. But it's still abuse. And it's not your fault. Martha felt something shift inside her, as if a heavy coat had slipped off her shoulders. She looked around at the faces, some smiling sadly, some nodding, and realized she was no longer alone. For the first time in years, she felt a flicker of belonging, of being understood without having to explain. She pressed the tissue to her eyes and whispered, "Thank you." The group answered not with applause, but with a quiet chorus of "You're welcome" and gentle nods. It was enough. The house was hushed under the blanket of a late autumn night in Springfield. Outside, the streetlights hummed faintly and a lone car rolled past, its tires whispering on the damp asphalt. Inside, Martha sat at the kitchen table with a chipped mug of chamomile tea growing cold beside her. The glow from her phone screen lit up her lined face as she scrolled to her voicemail. 3 new messages blinked like tiny warnings. She tapped the first. Mark's voice spilled through the speaker, soft but calculated. "Ava misses you, Mom. Please don't make her sad. Just do this one thing for us." Martha closed her eyes. She could almost picture his expression, the same boy she once cradled now using his daughter as a lever. Her thumb hovered, but she forced herself to listen on. The second message played. Mark's tone had shifted, more insistent. "Mom, you're confused. You're tired. Signing those papers isn't a big deal. We're family." He drew out the word family like a rope to pull her back into the old pattern. Martha felt a tremor rise in her chest. She reached for her tea but didn't drink. Then the third message came, harsher still. "You don't have anyone else, Mom. Just us. Don't push us away." The words clanged in her ears like a locked door. She set the phone down, her breath shallow. In the quiet kitchen she could hear the refrigerator humming, the clock ticking above the stove. For a moment she imagined George sitting opposite her, nodding gravely. It was as if someone had cleaned her ears, and she was hearing these tactics clearly for the first time, not pleas, but manipulation. With a deliberate motion she pressed delete. One message vanished. Then the next. Then the last. The screen returned to empty. She didn't call back. She sat still, her palms flat on the table, feeling a strange mixture of grief and strength. The next morning the phone rang again, a number she didn't recognize flashing across the screen. She hesitated, then answered. Hello? Grandma? It was Ava's voice, high and trembling. Mom asked me to call you. Can you help with money for my recital dress? Mommy says we don't have enough. Martha's heart clenched. She pictured Ava's little hands gripping the phone, coached to ask, not understanding. She tightened her hold on the handset, her knuckles white. Her voice came out calm but firm. Sweetheart, can you put your mom on the line, please? Grandma needs to talk to her directly. On the other end there was a pause, Ava's tiny breath, the shuffle of movement. Okay, she whispered. Then muffled words, and the sound of the phone changing hands. Martha sat up straighter in her chair, shoulders squared, eyes fixed on the window where the pale morning light was breaking through the lace curtains. Hello? Emily's voice came, a little too bright, a little too rehearsed. Martha took a deep breath. This time, she was ready. The late afternoon sun spilled through the blinds of Martha's small kitchen on Jefferson Street, painting stripes of light across the wooden floor. The phone rang again, Emily's name flashing on the screen. Martha inhaled deeply, steadying the flutter of anxiety in her chest. Her hand tightened around the receiver, knuckles whitening, as she pressed answer. Mom, you're making Ava cry. Emily's voice was sharp, precise, carefully rehearsed, dripping with faint urgency. Martha could hear the faint sound of Ava's small footsteps and a door closing in the background, a calculated performance. Martha's chest tightened. She drew a slow, deliberate breath. Emily, she began, voice firm but calm, you know very well I have never cut Ava out of my life. I have only set boundaries with you and Mark. You cannot use my love for her to manipulate me into giving money. Emily hesitated, then snapped, Mom, it's just for her recital dress. Just a little help, every grandma does this for their granddaughter. Martha's eyes narrowed, and she let a moment of silence hang. The hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the wall clock felt louder than usual. Then she said, voice stronger, steadier, it becomes manipulation when you use your child as a tool to push me after I've said no. Ava is not your messenger. She is not your bargaining chip. Another pause. Martha could hear Emily swallow, a tiny crack in her confident exterior. Well, I told Ava to ask, because you've always made things possible, Mom. You've always been the one to make magic happen. Now that you won't, what am I supposed to say to her? Her voice softened, losing the sharp edge. Martha leaned back slightly, keeping her tone gentle but unshakable. You tell her the truth. That I love her very much. That love cannot be bought. That the responsibility to provide for her comes from you and Mark, not from me. That is what children need to understand, not tricks to get what they want. Emily's voice faltered, almost breaking, stripped of the pretense and calculation. I guess. She trailed off, silence filling the line like heavy fog. Martha exhaled slowly, a mixture of relief and resolution warming her chest. She ended the call, setting the phone down carefully, as though it were a fragile object holding the weight of years of manipulation. Her gaze fell on the framed photograph of Ava on the kitchen counter, the little girl smiling after ballet practice, cheeks flushed with happiness. Martha's heart swelled with a quiet determination. She whispered to herself, soft but resolute, I will protect her, but this time, it will be with honesty, with boundaries, with love. Not with money. Not with fear. I will show her a different kind of strength. the late afternoon sunlight shifted, warming the room. Martha sipped from her mug of chamomile tea, feeling a clarity she hadn't known in decades. For the first time, she was not just resisting her family's demands, she was reclaiming her life, her dignity, and teaching Ava that love is unconditional, priceless, and unmanipulable. Outside, the leaves rustled in the October breeze, as if the world itself acknowledged Martha's newfound resolve. After ending the call with Emily, Martha felt an unusual stillness settle over her small kitchen. The tension that had gripped her chest for weeks began to ease, replaced by a warm, steady courage. She walked slowly to the living room, her eyes landing on Ava's ballet photo, the sunlight glinting off the frame. She realized that for the first time, she wasn't just protecting her finances, she was protecting the heart and soul of the little girl she loved. Martha sat down at her writing desk, pen in hand, and began jotting notes for Ava, letters filled with stories of hope, lessons about self-worth, and the importance of boundaries. "Dear Ava," she whispered aloud, "love is never bought or earned with money. It lives in honesty, respect, and care for yourself and others." With each word, Martha felt layers of fear and guilt peel away, leaving behind the truth she had long neglected. Her life belonged to her as much as it belonged to her family. The next days were quiet but purposeful. Martha planted flowers in the front garden she had neglected for years, cooked her favorite meals without compromise, and even treated herself to a small art class at the community center. She discovered that reclaiming her time, space, and joy wasn't selfish, it was healing. The weight of manipulation, deceit, and obligation that had shadowed decades of her life began to lift. She called Ava one evening, just to talk, just to laugh. "Grandma," Ava said, "I'm so glad you're happy." Martha smiled, feeling the pure love that had never wavered. It was real. Unconditional. And finally, untainted by obligation or money. In those moments, she understood that true strength lies in saying no, in protecting what is sacred, and in teaching the next generation the value of integrity, self-respect, and love. To all of you watching, if Martha's story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, leave a comment saying, "I'm listening," and share it with friends or family who may need to hear it. Subscribe to the channel so you won't miss more stories that inspire, heal, and remind us of the power of courage and love. Martha's journey reminds us that even after decades of hardship, it is never too late to reclaim your life, establish boundaries, and nurture authentic connections. Love cannot be measured in dollars, it is expressed in presence, trust, and respect. Thank you for listening, for connecting with this story, and for allowing these lessons to resonate in your own life. Take courage, honor your heart, and remember that every step toward your truth is a step toward freedom. See you in the next video.